Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a little bit of a rundown and reaction to the state of the Sanderson 2020. I think most of you are probably familiar with what this is, but if you're not, this is Sanderson's end of the year wrap-up essay where he fills his fans in on all of his various different projects. It's a really considerate thing to do because obviously it takes a lot of time to update fans on a fairly regular basis. This is quite long. I'm not going to go through every single thing that he has, but just to give you a heads up as to what he covers in this essay, he has an introduction, a part one, which is mainframe announcements, which is something I am going to get into because I think this is one of the most interesting things about the update. We also have part two, which talks about his year. Part three talks about Way of Kings, Leatherbound Kickstarter updates. Part 4 is updates on primary projects. Part 5, we have updates on secondary projects, then updates on minor projects, film, television, video game updates, other cool projects, translation updates, and projected schedule. The three things that I want to focus on would be his primary projects, his secondary projects, and the mainframe. I'll also kind of touch on some timeline stuff that he elaborates on within some of those things. I'll also say too, just in case anybody is wondering, in the adaptations part, there is no set in stone adaptation in the works, because if there was, I feel like that would be the thing to talk about. He does give you some updates about those, and there's potential for things in the works, but as of right now, there's no, by the way, Netflix is going to be doing Mistborn or anything like that. Even though the mainframe stuff is listed toward the beginning, I actually want to save that for the end because I have some thoughts about it and I also want to go through it in a little more detail, whereas the other ones are a little easier to get through, and I think the things that a lot of us have more connection to because they have to do with the books themselves. So I'm going to start with the primary. He talks about how Skyward 3 is now taking priority. It looks like we have a tentative title of Nowhere. It would seem Nowhere is our tentative title for it. He says that he is working on it now, and then afterwards he has one additional book to write. He also talks about how he has some novellas that will likely be written alongside Skyward 3, which I'll get more into in the mainframe section because that's where we get more details about them. After Skyward 3, it looks like Mistborn is going to be taking priority. So we have Mistborn 4, meaning the fourth book in the second era Mistborn books, because we have the completed trilogy, which is a part of Era 1, then we have Era 2, and then he does talk a little bit about Era 3. The second era books, though, also sometimes called Wax and Wane, it would seem that those are going to come after he has completed Skyward 3, so probably we're going to get a conclusion to the second era books pretty soon. He also gives us some dates for when he is planning on writing Era 3, and I was really surprised to see just how soon he's planning on writing these books. He has 2023 to 2025 for Era 3, which was really surprising to me. I mean, I know that he writes really fast, but given how many different projects he has, I wasn't expecting him to have Era 3 be so soon. He's also said that after that is when he's probably going to jump into Stormlight Archive 6, which means Stormlight Archive 5 is planned for before that, and he outlines it with an insane timeline. He has January of 2022 for when he's going to start. He's planning on it coming out fall of 2023. I think that's insane. I mean, if he can do it, that's awesome, but I think it's kind of crazy to have an 18-month turnaround for a book that is probably, I mean, who are we kidding? It's probably going to be 1,400 to 1,500 pages long. So to make it a little clearer, it looks like Nowhere, Skyward 3 is first, then Mistborn 4 from Era 2, then Stormlight Archive 5, then Era 3, and then Stormlight Archive 6. This leads us into the secondary projects. We have Elantris, Warbreaker, and Rhythmatist, all of which currently only have one book out. Rhythmatist of those three is the one that is so obviously not a standalone. You can read Warbreaker, you can read Elantris, and you're not going to be really frustrated at the fact that there's no sequel. They can be read by themselves, and if he never wrote a sequel to Elantris and Warbreaker, I wouldn't be too upset about it. Rhythmatist, I have been waiting for that sequel ever since I read that book. It is clearly not a standalone. The ending is quite the cliffhanger, but I'm glad that he has Rhythmatist where he does, because it looks like he does have plans to write the sequel to that one sometime around when he is writing Mistborn Era 3, which, like I said, he has that between 2023 and 2025. So that's not too long. That's not too long to wait. Now getting into the Mainframe stuff. So this is the part of the newsletter that I wasn't expecting, but I find to be maybe the most conversation worthy. I'm very interested to see what all of you think about this. On one hand, I think it sounds so amazing, so cool, such a boss move, some of the things he's doing. And then there's some other things that I have some other opinions on, which we'll get into, but I don't want to paraphrase anything because I want to make sure that I deliver this information correctly. You can, of course, go read it yourself, but I'm going to read through a little bit of what Mainframe is, what he says about it. To start, it says, I will be getting into some of these projects below. I think it's time to talk a little bit more about Mainframe, my audiobook company. A few years back, a friend of mine from Hollywood and I were chatting about how hard it was to get things made for film and television. Such projects are just way too big for us to do on our own. Yet I had a lot of projects I thought would work really well in this space. As kind of a stepping stone toward that, the two of us founded Mainframe, with Recorded Books being a launch partner. We figured that we could start taking some of the things I wanted to do for film and television and do them as audio originals, as this was a space the two of us, with some help from things like a writer's room, could do ourselves. This would let me both explore storytelling in some new ways and build toward one of my eventual goals, which is having my own film production company. I'll pause for a second. That's the part where I'm like, go for it, man. The main goal of Mainframe, then, is to take ideas I have that I, so far, haven't been able to do anything with, or to take stories I want to see done more as a television show, then try to make audio drama style expansions to them. The first thing we collaborated on was the original, which you can find right now on audiobook platforms. I wrote the outline, and then Mary Robinette, while she did the first draft, I went through kind of more an editorial role and did a second draft, then she did a third draft. I hope you'll take a look. Skipping ahead a little, it says, along with the original, we began several other projects like this for Mainframe, and I finally get to talk about them here. The first is an extension to the Reckoners series. When I wrote the original books, in my pitch to both the publisher and Hollywood, I explained that I really like to do a video game or other tie-in to the series by showing a different group of Reckoners and what they were up to. To that end, we've developed 3 novellas, co-written with the talented Steve Bowles, following a new group of Reckoners in the same universe. The novellas start around the time of the end of the original trilogy, then go past them into the future of the series. They can be seen as 3 episodes of a television show, or read together as a single novel, since they are all told from the same character's viewpoint. What I'm seeing in some of these things is it very much feels like he has so many ideas that he's kind of starting to delegate and provide opportunities for these collaborations with other people. I rarely find myself gravitating toward collaborative books. It's not that I don't think that they can be done well. I think it'll be interesting to see what those sorts of books look like. I'm not going to be picking up the novellas for Reckoners since I don't particularly care for Reckoners, but if more material comes out like that in the future, of which we'll get into, it'll be very interesting for me to see how much of it feels like Sanderson and how much of it feels like another author. He also goes into saying that the second project is working on the Legion Stephen Leeds series. Many of you may know that I wrote the original novella as kind of a pitch for a television show, and while that show has been in development pretty much continually since then, it's actually never gotten made. Therefore, we decided to try and basically build our own television series based on the concept, only doing it as audio dramas. In this case, we went with a traditional Hollywood writer's room, letting a showrunner, in this case my partner Max, with whom I founded Mainframe, guide the process. We're working together on a pilot episode in this framework. The final project I want to announce is an expansion to the Skyward series. The way the series has gone, the second book focused only on Spensa, without much of a look at the rest of the Skyward flight. As the third novel mostly continues Spensa's story, I worried about how isolated from the rest of the team the narrative would feel. Therefore, Jancy Patterson and I have designed a sequence of 3 tie-in novellas in this series. These will each be from a different viewpoint, 3 members of the team back on Detritus, running parallel to Skyward 3 and having some cool overlaps between them. So this is the part that I have a little bit more of an opinion on. I, as a fan of Stormlight, have not always loved the novellas that go alongside them. It's not that I don't like the material. I'm just, not a huge fan of novellas. And I don't know if it's entitlement or what, but I don't always love having to read something else over here in order to understand all the things over here. I think when it comes to the Cosmere itself and being able to see these little Easter eggs, that is exciting for me because those are other contained stories that don't rely on reading other things, but the novellas pretty much do. I mean, the Edge Dancer novella, the Dawn Shard novella, they're not going to probably make too much sense if you haven't read Stormlight Archive, whereas you can read Warbreaker and you don't have to have read Stormlight Archive, which I've always liked. I've liked that within the Cosmere, you can read these different things. And he does compare the Skyward novellas to the novellas for the Stormlight Archive series, so I don't mind that we're going to get more within them. I am curious as to how relevant they'll be for the story. I likely will read them, but I also think it's interesting that he kind of is addressing the fact that you really focus in on Spensa and he doesn't want the viewpoint to be somewhat narrowed. What I think is interesting about that is I'm like, hey, it's cool if you have a story that is basically a single point of view every now and then. I don't need everything you write to be this huge giant world. Again, not that I'm saying, Sanderson, you should take my advice. Just from my own perspective, I like that he is able to write some books that have a massive universe and have so many other little things tied in. And then he's able to write a series where you have a single point of view and it's super captivating. It's very different from his other works. It's sci-fi and not fantasy. I just have always appreciated that he's able to do that. So I think it's funny that he kind of is like, well, we're a little closed in on just Spensa, so we're going to expand it, have these other three running alongside it. So that'll be interesting. And like I said, I'll be very curious to see how much of those novellas feel like his work versus feeling like this other author, Jancy Patterson. A little bit of a summary to all of that. Sanderson says, after a few years, once these are all out, I'm hoping to get some feedback from you all in regards to these projects about what you liked and what you didn't. The eventual goal will be to try some things like this in the Cosmere, since I've been getting a lot of requests for more Cosmere material. However, I wanted to experiment a little first with things outside the Cosmere where continuity isn't as complex and the stakes aren't quite as high. I don't think it was meant this way at all, but just seeing, oh, I know some of you want more Cosmere material, so we're going to experiment with this stuff over here, and then maybe we'll bring it in over here. I kind of don't want him to do things based off of reader feedback. Is that a strange thing to say? I think he's so incredibly considerate of his fans and what we're interested in and what we like, and I think he's an amazing storyteller. I think it's incredible that he cares so much about readers, and I don't think the concept of getting feedback is bad, but I kind of want him to write whatever he wants to write and do whatever projects he wants to do, and if maybe I personally or other people aren't as interested in them, who cares? I want him to write what he's passionate about. I want him to do his thing. He's successful enough and has a big enough fan base, as the Leatherbound Kickstarter displayed very well. People will buy and people will try out pretty much, I feel like, anything that he does. So I'm kind of like, dude, go for it. Who cares? Screw us a little. Like, who cares if we love it or don't love it? I kind of feel like the Sanderson fandom is such a passionate, loyal fandom that we'll probably collectively, even if maybe not individually, collectively will probably support anything he does. And we may even have skewed biased views towards things he does to where we're going to be like, yeah, I thought it was awesome. Keep doing it. On the topic of the Cosmere stuff, though, I think it's interesting that he says that because he's been getting requests for more Cosmere material. First off, who the heck is bugging him to give us more Cosmere material? I want to know, because I'm kind of over here like, there's more than enough. I mean, I'll take more, but who's over here like requesting more of him? I also don't want to misrepresent what he's saying, but on the topic of seeing if they want more Cosmere material, maybe he'll give them more Cosmere material, that kind of thing. I would hope that he writes just reiterating the same point. If he has more Cosmere material to write, I want him to write it. If he wants to write what fans want, if he has the means, cool, but I also am always like, I just want writers to write what they're passionate about and what they love and tell the stories they have to tell. And I think he's in an incredibly amazing position to be able to do pretty much whatever he wants, and we're probably gonna all eat it up anyway. So again, I don't think that he's literally saying, I have no idea what I want to do next. I'm just going to see what you guys want and then I'll make something up. I don't think that's what he's saying by any means, but he's so connected with his fans. And I just don't want us to, I don't know, influence too much. I just think that he's so brilliant with his stories. And I'm just excited for what he does, regardless of what we want. I'll be very curious to see what all of you think about his State of Sanderson 2020. Let me know your thoughts on the Mainframe thing. Let me know your thoughts on the continuations of various different series. And then, of course, all the other stuff that I didn't get into. If you have thoughts on those, I would love to see them. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.